You think that pinning sounds like one of those really easy things about sewing, right? That is until you actually try, because trust me, I've seen so many of my students struggle just trying to get the pin through the fabric. And I know because that's what happened when I first started sewing. And then of course there's which directions do the pins go in? Can you sew over the top of them? And how many pins do you even need? If you've had any of these questions, then I think this video will be just right for you, so stick around. We're going to talk about how to actually pin the fabric, like the best ways to actually use your fingers and make it happen. And then we're going to talk the two different ways to actually pin fabric, the directions, pluses and minuses of them both. And then I want to talk you through my methodology and what I like to do to get the best results for my sewing. Welcome back, lovely ladies and gents. My name is Evelyn Wood and this is my channel. Here we talk about all things sewing, vintage and fashion and everything combined in between. So if this sounds like you, go right ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. But today's video we're talking about pinning and how to actually pin fabric. How do you do it? Seems hard. It's one of those things that's harder than it looks. And some people really struggle with just the action of trying to use your fingers and make it work, and other people seem to get it pretty quickly. So first up, how do you actually pin? What's the trick? The hardest part is usually getting it onto your patterns when you start. The real trick is that you need tension on the fabric. If you just try and pin when it's just all loose, it's really hard. So you really need to put tension on it so you can actually pull the pin through either side. Let's say, for example, you've got your pattern piece here. Now, it's really hard. So it can just turn out a mess a lot of the time. So what's the trick? As I said, you need to keep tension on this at all times. So I use this hand as a stabilizer on this side, and then this hand to stabilize on this side. And simply pop your pin in, and you kind of slide it down along the like table. And then this is going to be exaggerated. You need to lift it up so you create a ridge here so that the pin can actually slide through. And I usually put it just over my nail like this. See, pretty easy. So holding it here, holding here, pop it in, lift it up slightly, put your nail in so you can create that ridge so it comes through. So if I tried to do it without this hand holding it, you can see, like, it doesn't really work as well. And if I tried to do it like without this hand, doesn't really work. It's the combination of the two together. And when you get the hang of it, you can do it pretty well. That's what it looks like without any exaggeration. Simply in and out. There we go. We didn't disturb any of the fabric around. Now the idea is you want to be pinning at about your seam allowance. You don't want to be pinning inside here like this, because this is where your garment will be. This is the outside. So you want this to stay no pinholes. So always keep your pins, it's a little ninja trick, on to the seam allowances only. Of course, once you have your pattern pieces cut, it's time for sewing. So there's two main directions that you can use to pin your fabric. The first direction is going along the length and the seam edge of the fabric, what I call lengthwise. So simply pop your pin in, using the same sort of technique as before, as using your finger as a lever to kind of lever it up, and then the end can actually pop through. Again, I always use this hand to kind of hold it, and then pop your pin in using your fingers to kind of hold it tight, remember, and then put your pin up. Now these you want to pin at approximately your actual stitch line. So if you're using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, you want to put your pins down 1.5 centimeters or just inside. So you don't want to be pinning out here, for instance, if your stitch line is going to be up here, because then you might end up with pin marks down on your fabric and no one wants that. So remember, try and pin at your seam line or just inside if you're unsure. And this is actually one of the benefits of pinning in this direction, is because it actually gives you a guide for sewing as well. So as you're putting this through the machine, you've actually got a guide as to where you should be sewing. Something super important to remember here is you want these pins to be in the direction of your sewing. So always think about being at the sewing machine and which way you're going so that you can pull out the pins as it goes through the machine. Because if they're the other way, say they're in this direction with the little balls up this side rather than this side, you have to kind of pull them out from the back and it's really difficult. You want to make sure that you're pinning them with all the fullness of the fabric on your left side, because you don't want it in here, you want it on this side, and your pin heads then facing down towards you so you can pull them out towards you as you sew. Direction number 2 is crosswise. So you can actually put your pins in the complete opposite direction, which involves putting them in this way. So they're completely perpendicular. I like to use my finger underneath here as a kind of like lever so I can pivot the pin, and it gives it a nice, using my thumb, gives it that tightness through here, so then it will just pop through really easily. Let me show you again. So I'm holding it here with these 2 fingers, popping it in, using my finger underneath as a lever to kind of lever it up and pop it through. So in this direction is your little crosshair, what I call crosshair pins. That's what I learned. A lot of people call them cross pins, perpendicular, vertical, I'm never sure. I'm calling them cross pins. So now you have the 2 ways, the lengthwise and the cross pins, but which is better? So let's start with the lengthways. So some of the benefits are that it actually gives you a guide for sewing. So that line that it follows, you can use it as a guideline to sew straight and around curves. It can be really useful. One of the negatives of this pinning in this direction is that you can't sew over them. If you do, you are going to break a needle, and it will be, if you haven't done that yet, it's a little bit dramatic. So you need to sew and then stop when you get just before the pin, and then pull it out, and then continue sewing, stop, pull out your next pin, keep going. Some people don't like this, and that's why they might use this direction. The main benefit is that you can sew over the top of them in this direction. As you're sewing down in this direction, it will actually push the needle, the pin, out of the way, and it won't actually, like, the needle won't go down onto the pin, it'll push it in the other direction. So you can sew over the top of them, which can be useful if you aren't very confident at sewing yet and you need extra help with the pins. It can hold things in place really nicely. But the downside is that you generally need more pins if you do this, and that you actually end up pinning onto the garment, what will be outside, because your pins extend the seam allowance, like with your stitch line where you'll be stitching. They go outside of that, and you can leave terrible holes in your garment, which is not really good. So you might ask, which is better? Well, there isn't really an answer for that. It really depends on what you like. So what I like to do, this has become my habit, I like my pins to go in the lengthwise direction. It gives me a guide to sew with, I find it much easier to sew, you don't need as many, and it doesn't leave any pin marks anywhere. I like mine going this way. However, I do use a crosshair pin for instances like when you have a seam and you might be needing to match up a waist seam, or maybe notches that need to stay together. These are points that you need those to be exact. You want them to stay exactly where they are, because as you're sewing down, your foot can actually push the fabric in a certain direction and it can move it out of whack. So if you have to remove your pin before you get there, that's not what you want. So I actually do both. So I would pin my lengthwise pin to actually make it so that it matches perfectly on the seam line, and then use my crosshair. This is probably why I call it a crosshair and why I learned a crosshair, because it actually creates that cross section, to then cross it right on the seam to hold it in place. That way I can use my pins lengthwise like I like, As I come sewing up to it, I can stop and pull this one out, but then I can actually stitch over the top and stitch over the top of this pin here, so it stays perfectly in place. But a word of warning, you don't want to be stitching over your pins all the time. Do so very slowly, very carefully. If you hit just one, even those crosswise ones, you could still like hurt the machine. I wouldn't recommend doing it all of the time, only when really necessary, and that's why I choose to do that as well. Now, one last question you might ask yourself is, how many pins do you need? Well, it really depends. Basically, when you start sewing, you're probably going to put about 1,000 pins in there because that's what you feel you need. And that's probably what you do need. Myself, now, if I was sewing this here, for instance, I would do simply this crosshair pin, and that's all I would use. I wouldn't even put any other pins anywhere else, because as you get better and better at sewing, you'll get really skillful at being able to manipulate it as you go through the machine, pushing and pulling and easing as needed with your hands and knowing your machine. So as you get better and better and faster, you'll get better at, you want to use as least pins as possible, because it does slow you down. It's time to pin them, time to take them out, you have to stop every time. But the answer is simply you use as many pins as you feel that you need. Now, this covers the basics of pinning and the directions and those commonly asked sort of beginner questions that you have. Now, make sure you leave me a comment below telling me which pin method you like. Is it vertical or is it the cross? Which one? Or maybe a combination like me. Let me know below. Put any extra tips that you might have for any beginners that you found down below too. So if you're a beginner, make sure you read those comments, because there'll be heaps of information down there for you as well. So please like this video if you liked it. And if you feel that you know somebody else that could use this information, please, I would feel so grateful if you would share it with them. As always, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, bye. Esme, come on. Oh. Ah. This way, that's better. You're going to help sew. Oh, no, of course not.